Hola, ¿qué tal amigos, amigas, elfos, elfas, locust, covenant y cualquier criatura que habita este canal de YouTube? Soy su amigo Solidus Master 117. Hoy les traigo completamente subtitulado un clip respecto a cómo se desarrolla nuestro juego favorito. ¿Qué tiene de especial?, te estarás preguntando. Bueno, todos sabemos que Gears 5 viene con muchos cambios, y estos no se limitan al reducido título o al cambio de personaje principal. El nuevo título viene con cambios en cómo se realiza la captura de los actores, los cuales entregarán mejores cinemáticas. No olvides que el mejor contenido en español de Gears está en este canal. Suscríbete para más Gears Software. Comenzamos.
Step through to the creation, and you guys are both. You've been at Gears, on Gears from the beginning, both of you, correct?
I'm a little bit ahead of Greg. I think you're
Rod's ahead of me. I came about a year later on board.
Yeah. So we can talk, and I also want to talk a little bit about the evolution from early Gears to where we are now, and not just from a tech standpoint, but even from a process standpoint, and how that might have tweaked and evolved and stuff like that. So we have why don't we play our first little bit of a trailer here? This is our B-roll clip. This is about the storyboard process. So Greg, do you want to talk a little bit about why we do this and what is this all about?
So in a lot of ways, this is sort of like our first look at everything. We'll get a script for a scene, and one thing I learned long ago was that you should, if you read a script and you can't start making pictures in your head, maybe you shouldn't direct. And I realized then that when I would talk to people about scripts, that sometimes people don't visualize this, or at least people don't all visualize it the same way. So when you take a script and we start then visualizing on storyboards, at least it's a starting point for working with Rod, working with people in narrative, working with the game design, saying, hey, this is what our visualization of that script is. Is everyone on board for this? So basically it becomes like this early blueprint for us to then take a look at the scene, see if this paces out well to us, if it works well, and if we're good here, then we can move forward into our next process, which is going into a 3D previs. At that point, where we actually use 3D models and place everything out in the scene. But the storyboard phase, this is our chance to actually start drawing things, putting it on paper, taking a look at it. And if we don't like something, we can easily just throw it away and start writing something again. It's a cheap process to go and find our story beats here and see what works in the beginning stages.
You also use this for composition, right? In terms of framing up shots and what you want in the shot and those sorts of things, right?
Yep, absolutely. Because basically, when we're telling a story through pictures, as much as we have character performances and dialogue, we are trying to we're telling the story visually, and so we at this point we're then trying to frame up our shots, trying to see what our pacing, our timing is, when we're going to have our close-ups on our characters, what are the dramatic moments, and feeling it all out at this point.
No, cool. And then the one thing that I find interesting.
There's only one thing, by the way. He only finds one thing.
In this scenario, in this moment here, is because games are so unique in that there's a very gameplay component to the story, and then there's the story part of the story, and then where you're going through and which one feeds into the other one? Does the gameplay idea come first and then it leads into the storyboarding process? Or is there some storyboarding process that you go to Rod and say, hey, this is some of those story beats that I want to tell? How does that dynamic work out?
It's generally driven from the game. We don't go all the way down. Like the story has to feed the game and the game has to feed the story. And so one of the things we generally start to do is we start with a narrative of what's the story that we want to tell, or at least kind of big beats. And then we kind of put down, we sort of think of it as building a body, if you will. Like we will find a spine of a story. We go like, this is the kind of arc we want this character to have, or these characters to have. And then as we then think through like what are moments that we want to have along that journey, and then where are the places we want to go, what are the types of gameplay, what kind of the enemies. And so it starts with what do we want the story to be, and then from that we then start to think about what are the gameplay moments we can have within that, and what are the stories we can have within that. And so we work with Tom, our writer, and we sort of, and Matt, who's the head designer for the campaign, and the narrative team, to kind of figure out, okay, like where do we want to go with this, and then we start to hit the sort of different story beats.
I think one thing that's interesting about that is that we're always trying to sync up as much as we can between gameplay and the cinematic and story side and the storyboard side, because a lot of times in gameplay you're trying to, I think it's been put, finding the fun, and there's times where you had a plan in mind in which you're moving forward on the gameplay and you had a story beat in mind based on the gameplay, but now gameplay has changed, or you had a process that's been improved and you realize, hey, we like this better, people are responding to this much better than what we had before, we now need to modify the story to support this, so that's then where we have some change, we have some flexibility, and that's then where we can actually do that in the storyboard and the previous process and make those changes. So
yeah, I guess because you haven't captured any actors yet, or there hasn't been a lot of far down the road work that you have to go and do reshoots or reanimations or what have you. That would be, now's the time to make the decisions around what's working and what's not.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of one of the harder barriers. Like once we've captured motion and we've gone to a stage and Greg has directed the motion and the actors, like that's kind of now there's a lot of resistance to change. Like up until mocap, we can be pretty fluid about, this moment isn't working, or now we've made a change that we want to reflect that in the story. But once we have mocap, because even with dialogue, we change dialogue all the time, much to your chagrin. But but the notion of the motion part, because it's so time-consuming and it takes a lot of work. It's hard to nuance little bits and pieces of it you kind of capture as a moment. Like that to us is sort of a threshold. Once you cross through, we've got the motion, then we'll actually do things where we'll change dialogue to make sure we can keep the motion, or we'll make other things like where we try to hold on. We don't want Greg to have to do a reshoot. So even if we're making changes to the story late, we oftentimes try to find a way to do it in a way that doesn't impact what motion he's already captured.
Okay.
I was going to say, resistance seems like a strong word, but at the same time,
you know what I mean? Like there's like how you have, like, how easy it is to change something. Like same thing with the script.
Exactly.
Like when we write it down, I can change it instantaneously. Once it's been recorded and implemented in the game, it's harder. Like, do I really want to change this? Like, yeah, and the same thing with motion. Like, up till you do motion, we're kind of like, yeah, we can make changes. As soon as you get motion, we're kind of like, really? Like there's there's that one more question of like, you really want to change?
Conversations like that recently.
No, never.
But it is always about, we might want to unwind a little, and it's just sort of it's how much do we want to unwind? And sometimes it's a little unwind. It's just like, okay, we're talking about the center of the spring here. You don't want to unwind that far, So there is some flexibility. But.
We may have talked about change of motion about 90 minutes ago, by the way.
I know. So that is the center of the spring.
Everything you saw at E3 is actually now changing.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and I think, and then before we kick off to the next little segment here, I want to start this idea, and the one thing that I really liked about the trailer that I think was such a central theme to all of the Gears games has been these powerful emotional moments where you're playing and you've got this action movie of a game that you play that could very easily be that pure 80s action movie that you think, and all of a sudden you get these really, I don't want to say tender, but like moments that where it hits you harder than you expect them to hit you because of the way that the game is built. And I thought this trailer, I know more than the people that haven't seen the trailer, but even just in the context of that trailer, where there was a lot of emotionality inside of that. And is that something that's part of the thinking process when you're doing that, when you're doing your storyboarding and the previs, and obviously the script writing is taken to that into consideration, but do you already think about how do you visually want to hit those moments?
I mean, visually, I'll tee up to you to pick up the visual part, but the notion for us is like, it's just part of telling the story. Like it's much like when you're, like real life has moments of humor, has moments of sadness, has moments of drama, has moments of anger. Like, so the thing is you don't want to be tonality, you don't want to have one tone. And so one of the things I love about working in Gears is that you can have the comic booky action, you can have a good laugh, and you can also have a deep emotional moment like the Maria scene. And so I like playing in a world where those things aren't off limits, that you can do that sort of stuff. And so we don't go in going like, okay, guys, this is not going to be successful unless we have 3 moments where we try to make somebody cry or whatever, right? Like that's we don't have emotional KPIs or something, but we are just trying to tell a story that resonates with people, and we want to have it be more than just a single note. And so, so we write that way. We write from a perspective of like, much like the rock paper scissors moment. And because if you're gonna play a video game, that's the difference. Like I think people don't understand about storytelling between games and movies. As an example, is like a movie is in 90 minutes, and you can kind of live through a lot in 90 minutes. Like 90 minutes, you can kind of take if it's a dark, a post-apocalyptic kind of depressing sort of whatever. For 90 minutes, you can kind of make your way through that. But when you play a video game for 10 plus, 12 plus, whatever hours, like to be in a dark place for 12 hours is going to be like rough. And so that was one of the things we look at with Gears 4. We were like, you don't want Kate for all 12 hours, Kate going like, let's go get my mom, let's go get my mom, let's go get my mom. And like every time
you get the tomato sequence.
Yeah. And so you have to have moments where, I mean, in real life, people have dark humor and black humor that in the worst of times, they will still be making jokes, much like I'm doing right now. And so you want to have that change of emotion and pace. But I mean, in terms of visuals, like that's all Greg.
Well, no, that's what's important, because then when we're putting the storyboards together, we're then put together an animatic. So we take the storyboards and we actually make a moving storyboard out of it, where we have either temp dialogue or dialogue that's already been recorded by our actors that we put together in the scene with music and sound effects. So then you actually look at that and you get a sense for the pace of the scene and where you hold on the dramatic beats, or where you're going to get that specific close-up because you want to get a certain emotion out of the character at that point. So there is an important process in that previs moment to actually draw out that dramatic moment through not just visuals, but also through sound and dialogue and pacing.
Okay. Yeah, that's one of the biggest things we found is that like even no matter what we think we are trying to go for, until the music comes in, it's really hard to tell, right? Like when Maria was in like every time we did the Maria scene, like every review of the Maria scene ended the meeting in laughter. Like everybody laughed. And it was things because you just didn't have the emotional context. And the moment we brought in the soundtrack and the choir comes in and the strings come in and then people leave with a tear in their eye. And so it was the same even for the Gears 5 reveal. Like, we had different things with, like, we had that scene for how long? With no music hardly at all, or trying to use Gears 4 music. And it wasn't until we got a music that was crafted to that moment that the turning of the necklace and the confession of what's going on, like all that got all heightened. And so what felt like a good moment or a good scene becomes a great scene, and so that's music plays a huge part of that. And that's why I'm so excited about having Ramin back.
Absolutely. And because I think I walked into Rod's office and said, all right, here it is, what do you think? We're like, wow. Yeah, this is took up a couple notches. This is good.
Ramin Djawadi being the composer for Gears 4, Gears 5, Game of Thrones,
Westworld.
He's got some bona fides. So why don't we roll to the next segment, which is the production process, in terms of the performance capture process, I should say. So that's where we get the actors in their suits and they're being the bones, I guess, to build the scene on.
Yeah, and this was the first for us. This is the first time we actually did performance capture with our voice actors on a stage. Usually our process for this is we'll record voiceover separately, and then we'll actually use motion capture actors or local actors on the mocap stage, then to act out the scene, and then we marry the two together through animation. So this was our first chance to actually work with our actors on the stage and get a full performance from them, fully embodying their characters. And it was good because I think not only were we happy about getting a chance to do this, the actors were happy to do this. They were happy to finally fully embody their characters on screen.
Nightmares.
Yeah, and one of the things we looked at is just like how do you, it's a lot of times it works fine. Like, we've done, with Gears 1, 2, 3, 4 Judgment as like separated voice and motion. So it works fine, but one of the things you find is when you have a lot of physicality is that one of the things you miss when you have a voice actor in a studio by themselves or a motion actor by themselves is you lose the kind of how emotion changes your voice. And that was one of the things that we looked at is when we said, okay, we're going to do this experiment. We're going to do a few scenes as performance capture. And one of the things we went in and we really looked at, like, what are the important scenes, but also what are the scenes that have a lot of physicality to them, like the Kate and Del colliding and talking and expressing while they hit into each other. That's something that's really hard to pull off. For me, like the first time, it's just a super simple, small thing. But the first time I was really clued into that is like when the first time I played Uncharted 2. And I was really at the very beginning of Uncharted 2. I think it's Nathan is like reaching and picking up a cooler on the boat, and he talks while picking up the cooler. And as he picks up, there's an exertion in his voice that you can hear him picking up a cooler in his voice. And like in a studio, in a sound booth, you wouldn't capture that little bit of extra effort and strain in his throat while he's trying to lift his cooler. And it's one of those things where you really start to see that, oh, this is how this stuff's going to get like taken up a notch, is by really putting them in the place and having that, what the body is doing and how the body is moving, it impacts the vocal delivery of that line.
Yeah, it helps ground that in performance. You know, one of the things that the way we did facial for animation in Gears 4 was that it basically was all hand animated. You know, you had actually our animators would actually go in front of a camera and actually mimic what the lines were as a base, but then we go in and animate everything after that to put in the details. The one thing they love about performance capture like this, or at least getting facial capture even in the voiceover studio, is the fact that they get exact lip sync. Yeah. You know, so that helps ground that performance, same as what you're getting with the efforts happening, helping to ground that performance on the stage for what actors are doing.
Right. And I think it's one of the things that I like about our cast, with Laura and Eugene and Liam and John and everyone, is they're actors. They're not, you know, you get good voice actors, and they do a really good job of being good voice actors, and then you get good physical actors. So when we do the performance capture process, you get the whole package. You get the voice delivery, which is obviously very critical, but you get, like you said, you get that thing with the Uncharted 2 that you mentioned, where there is a performance, a physical performance part of it as well. Is that important, or am I overstating that?
No, I think they're all. It's just the notion of, like, I find that voice actors love to do performance capture because they like to be able to embody the entire character and bring more to it than just their voice. And that's even different from, like, when you talk to them, they'll tell you that performance capture is different than on-camera work, right? Because on-camera work, you have to block to a certain camera, and how you move through a set on a TV show, as an example, like there may be a 3-camera TV show or a single camera TV show, and you have to block to the camera and you have to perform to the camera and those sorts of things. In performance capture, because there essentially is no camera other than what is in Greg's head, but in terms of you never capture or bias people to a certain direction or whatever, they're able to just perform, and then Greg can put the camera wherever he wants and frame up that shot in any way he wants.
El antiguo mando planeaba usar estos sires como soldados, siendo transportados al monte Kadar para atacar a los locos. Esa era como que su estrategia, pero ellos nunca pudieron...
I do hope you've prepared dessert as well.